Have you ever been threatened? Yes, to me. And I always took it as a weakness and did not take threats seriously. All this was before 3 bandits broke into my house, who wanted me to give my children to my wife's lover. That's when I realized that I was in a terrible situation. Hello, I'm Mark Adams. Before delving into this unfortunate story, I'd like to provide some background about myself and my former spouse, Jennifer. I stand at 5'10" and weigh 180 kilograms. I maintain my fitness by running 2 laps around the park every morning, whenever work allows. Additionally, I swim several miles each week and frequent a traditional gym twice a week for weightlifting and MMA training. While I'm not quite Bruce Lee, most of my 180 libs consists of muscle. Some say I bear a passing resemblance to George Clooney. I hold a master's degree in computer technology, a postgraduate degree in business management, and a bachelor's degree in economics, all obtained from Oxford University in England. My father served at the U.S. Embassy as a translator, which initially brought us to England. Upon the conclusion of his service, he returned to the U.S., but I opted to remain to complete my education. Currently, I own and operate my own business as a computer repair specialist. Additionally, I'm developing a new foundational program to cater to various applications ranging from gaming to military use. Its primary feature is its real-time problem-solving capability. It should be ready for implementation within the next 6 months to a year. I have a younger sister, Patricia, who is 2 years younger than me. Known as Potty Pat, I cherish our close bond. We share everything and keep no secrets from each other. Currently, she works as a junior partner at a prestigious law firm in New York State. My ex-wife, Jennifer, stands at 5'3" and weighs 110 kilograms. She maintains her slim figure by hitting the gym at least 4 times a week. With a face akin to an angel, her smile illuminates any room. Jennifer possesses striking features: a 34B bust, a 22-toed waist, and 33 hips. Sporting red hair and green eyes, she carries a temper to match her fiery appearance. Jennifer holds a law degree and serves as a corporate attorney at XYZ, a PR advertising agency. Jennifer and I crossed paths for the first time at Pat's graduation ceremony. Pat and Jennifer's sister, Amy, were dorm roommates, and they introduced us during the graduation celebration. Surprisingly, we discovered that we lived just 3 miles apart in the same mid-sized town, Freestone, Texas. Our connection was immediate, and we began dating. 6 months later, we tied the knot. Jennifer commenced her career at XYZ as a junior attorney, earning a modest 5-figure salary plus bonuses, while I worked as a software code compiler and decompiler for ABC flight controllers, earning a moderate 5-figure salary plus bonuses. We resided in a pleasant neighborhood in the 3-bedroom house left to me by my grandparents. Pat received a lump sum inheritance. Although Jennifer's parents and sister lived in New York, my parents had relocated to Florida following their retirement. We convened with our respective families about twice a year, alternating between Thanksgiving and Christmas gatherings. With comfortable incomes, nice cars, and biannual vacations, we savored a content life. 2 years into her job, Jen's promotion to junior partner marked a turning point. She began working late and occasionally joined her friends for Friday night outings. Naturally, I grew suspicious and resorted to typical behaviors, checking her belongings, reading her emails, and even installing a keylogger on her laptop. Paranoia aside, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss in our marriage, despite finding no evidence of wrongdoing when I followed her one evening. While Jen thrived in her career and aimed to become a senior partner within 5 years, I found myself stuck in a dead-end job at a family-owned business where promotions were reserved for relatives, regardless of competence. Frustrated with the lack of advancement opportunities, I decided to start my own business specializing in corporate computer repair and security upgrades. Unlike traditional repair shops, my focus was solely on enhancing systems and implementing top-notch security measures. Despite anticipating a slow start, my business analysis projected significant earnings within a year, surpassing my current income. I sat down with Jen and tried to convey that the upcoming year would be challenging, but all predictions indicated that we would ultimately benefit in the long term. I chose not to disclose the new project I was working on to avoid complicating matters. She vehemently opposed the idea, questioning why we should risk everything when things were going so well. It seemed she was thriving while I felt stuck in a dead-end job. Jen and I had always kept our finances separate, except for our shared account which covered all our expenses. Each month we both contributed an equal amount to cover half of the expenses and kept the remainder for ourselves. I resigned from my job and launched my new venture, using my savings and a loan against my house for funding. I rented a small workshop with an attached office and began advertising and making phone calls. Within 3 months, I was breaking even and feeling content. Simultaneously, my work on the new project was progressing smoothly. Then one evening, Jen dropped a bombshell. She informed me she was 3 months pregnant, expecting twins. My paranoia led me to scrutinize the calendar, and to my surprise, I discovered that during the time of conception, she had been away for a week in Miami on business. At that moment, I suspected infidelity and decided to arrange a DNA test as soon as possible. As soon as she discovered that she was pregnant, she stopped all intimate activity, at least with me, citing concerns for the safety of the child. I reassured her that she was overreacting and even had the doctor confirm the same, but she remained firm in her decision, leading to a dry spell of at least 6 months for me. I supported her throughout her pregnancy by attending relaxation classes, applying oil to her growing belly to prevent stretch marks, massaging her feet nightly, and tolerating her increasingly frequent mood swings. Meanwhile, my business was thriving. I had hired a recent college graduate, Greg, to assist with computers, and May joined as a receptionist. I never discussed my business with Jen as she didn't seem interested. One afternoon, while meeting with a client to discuss server upgrades, I received the call. The baby was on its way and I needed to rush to the hospital. I explained the situation to the client, who was understanding and congratulated me before sending me off. For a few weeks I'd anticipated this moment and was prepared. Since I wasn't far from home, Jen didn't need to summon an ambulance. Upon arriving home, I found Jen ready with her go-bag. After ensuring she was settled in the car, I retrieved her bag and the DNA kit before taking her to the hospital. Following a checkup by the doctor, she was admitted to a prenatal ward with her own private room. Despite harboring suspicions about the twins' paternity, I remained excited about impending fatherhood. The doctor advised me to head home since it would still be a while before delivery. I left eagerly, had a bite to eat, and waited until I dozed off. Suddenly, the hospital called. Jen was fully dilated, experiencing contractions every 7 minutes, and the birth was imminent. Hastily donning a coat in the early hours, I rushed to the hospital, arriving in record time. Guided by a nurse, I entered the delivery room where I found my wife in labor, and, moments later, witnessed the birth of our babies. As the nurse tended to them, ensuring they were in good health, I discreetly collected DNA samples from each child for testing. Though I already felt a bond with them, I needed to confirm paternity. Approaching Jen, I shared a tender kiss, but noticed a sadness in her eyes as she professed her love. Eventually, I was asked to leave as Jen was taken to the recovery ward for some rest. The following day, I called everyone to share the great news. The grandparents were especially overjoyed and couldn't wait to see their grandchildren. Pat and Amy mentioned they'd attempt to take some time off to visit their niece and nephew. I visited the hospital with a large bouquet for Jen and also dropped off the DNA kit on the way, being informed it would take approximately 10 days for results. The doctor informed me that Jen would remain hospitalized, as she had suffered severe tearing due to her size and needed time to heal. Over the next 5 days, I visited her regularly, but she appeared preoccupied and distant. Concerned, I asked the doctor about her behavior, and he assured me it was normal and she would eventually recover. On Friday, when I visited her, the doctor informed me that she would be discharged on Saturday afternoon. I had prepared the nursery for our incoming babies and eagerly awaited the moment I could bring them home. Saturday morning, I ensured that the safety cribs were properly secured and everything was set for her return. At 1:30, I went to the hospital to retrieve my family. Upon arriving at her room, I found it empty. Concerned, I inquired with the nurse about the whereabouts of my wife and children. To my shock, I learned that they had been picked up earlier by another man. Despite my inquiries, neither the nurse nor Jen's cell phone yielded any information. The situation escalated when the senior nurse intervened, ultimately involving security and the police due to suspicions of a possible abduction. Detectives reviewed security footage suggesting Jen had left voluntarily with the man, whose identity remained undisclosed. Advised to return home, I was assured that further communication would follow. I was sitting at home feeling unwell, anxiously awaiting news. Around 6 in the evening, there was a knock on the door. Peering out, I saw the same 2 detectives. As I let them in, I noticed neither would meet my gaze. I inquired about the situation, and the woman spoke first. "Mr. Adams, we've visited your wife and she and the children are safe. However, we cannot disclose their whereabouts. I'm deeply sorry." Confusion gripped me. Where is my family? Why isn't Jen answering her phone? What's happening? The male detective spoke next. "I regret to inform you that your wife has left you taking the children. She mentioned her attorney would contact you soon. Again, I'm terribly sorry. Please refrain from any rash actions until you hear from her. I'd hate to see you in trouble." With that, they departed, leaving me alone once more. Hollow, sickened, my hands trembling, tears streaming down my face. I had reached the nadir of despair. On Sunday morning, I woke up after crying myself to sleep. I went through the motions of getting up, showering, dressing, and making breakfast almost mechanically. After breakfast, I felt slightly improved and decided to call Jen's parents, hoping they might have some information. Jen's father answered the phone enthusiastically, informing me they planned to visit next weekend. I interrupted him to explain what had transpired. He expressed disbelief at Jen's actions and promised to call her and get back to me. As lunchtime approached, I went to Denny's and indulged in an unhealthy meal: a mega burger, fries with onion rings, and a beer. Feeling somewhat better, I returned home and checked our answering machine for messages, finding none. I turned on the TV, though my mind was elsewhere, still trying to comprehend recent events. Eventually, I gave up and glanced at the clock, realizing it was past midnight, so I retired to bed. I had a restless night, unable to quiet my mind, so I surrendered at 6 in the morning, got up, took a shower, and went downstairs for breakfast. As I sat watching the news on TV, pondering my next move, the phone rang. It was Jen's lawyer, asking if I could attend a meeting later that day. We settled on 2 o'clock, and he hung up. Maybe now I'd finally get some answers. Arriving at his office, I was promptly ushered in. I had anticipated meeting only Jen's attorney, but to my surprise, my wife and her boss, Carl Prescott, were also present on the sofa. Though I longed for clarity, I refused to break the silence first, opting instead to sit and wait. My tactic seemed to unsettle everyone, just as I had hoped, prompting the attorney to speak up first. "Mr. Adams, I've called you here to discuss the terms of your divorce from Mrs. Jennifer Adams. I have a proposal from your wife and Mr. Prescott. In essence, they suggest that she divorces you due to irreconcilable differences. You would retain the house, your retirement benefits, all savings and ownership of your business. Similarly, Mrs. Adams would retain her assets, but additionally, you would agree to allow Mr. Prescott to adopt your children. In exchange, Mr. Prescott would deposit $2 million into an account of your choice." I practically overturned the desk as I stood up. "There's absolutely no way my children are up for sale at any price. You can have the woman for free. I want nothing to do with her, so get lost." Jennifer stood up and spoke in a conciliatory tone. "Mark, I never meant to cause you pain, but I know I have, and I'm genuinely sorry for that. I've been in a relationship with Carl for a while now, and we're deeply in love, planning to marry. Unfortunately, Carl can't have biological children, so he wants to adopt ours. We can provide them with everything they need, a wonderful home, top-notch education, and a great start in life. What can you offer? An old house and a small computer repair shop? You lack ambition and financial stability. At least consider giving the kids a chance. If you refuse to cooperate, I'll seek legal action and ensure you lose everything, sir. That's the house, half your income, savings, business, and any chance of seeing the children. It's a no-win situation for you, but at least this way you'll get something out of it. Jen, the house is legally mine, and you have no right to it. I have minimal savings, so your claim to half of it means nothing. You earn more, so support will be negligible. I'll gladly provide for my children, even if I only see them occasionally. As for the business, it's nothing without me, and I don't have a 401k for you to take. See you in court. With that, I stood and walked away, leaving 3 bewildered individuals in my wake. I went straight to Danny's and ordered dinner and beer. After that, I returned to my cold, empty house. Sitting down with a beer to watch TV, I was still fuming. Just after 11, a loud knock on the door woke me up. Still stunned, I didn't look through the peephole before opening it. The door swung open violently, making me stagger back, but I managed to stay on my feet. 3 men burst into the room trying to grab me. Now I was in full combat readiness and quickly disabled the first opponent with a blow. The second one grabbed my head, but I pulled away just as the third one hit me, knocking me to the ground. While the first man was trying to catch his breath, the other 2 mercilessly kicked me, and I began to lose consciousness. Fearing for my life, I decided to leave the evidence for the police. The supervisor demanded that I sign the form, threatening to return if I did not comply. In a moment of defiance, I hit him with my head, causing him to recoil, but thanks to the blow, I still have traces of his DNA. Enraged, he cursed and backed away, leaving me unconscious for a moment while he continued to kick me. I gradually regained consciousness, hearing voices but unable to discern their source. Vague shapes filled the room as my vision cleared intermittently, only to be enveloped by darkness once more. Upon my next awakening, sunlight flooded through the window, revealing a woman reading in an armchair. It took a moment to recognize her as Cam, the wife of my MMA instructor, Phil Wright. Attempting to speak, my parched mouth produced only a croak. Cam noticed and promptly summoned assistance with the call button. A nurse arrived, checking my vitals with a smile before inquiring about my condition, to which I could only croak a reply. After a brief absence, she returned with ice chips, which tasted more satisfying than the finest scotch. Cam held my hand while dialing speedily with the other. Glad to see you're back, Mark. You really scared us. How are you feeling? Like I've been hit by a truck. A truck might have done less damage. At that moment, a doctor entered. I'm relieved to see you awake after 3 days in a coma. I believe you've turned a corner. Are you up for eating something? Doc, I could devour a whole cow, horns and all, just make sure it's wiped clean. Everyone found it amusing, but when I attempted to join in the laughter, the pain in my chest and side was so intense that I nearly lost consciousness. The doctor adjusted my pain medication and demonstrated how to use the button for additional morphine before departing, assuring me of his imminent return. I drifted into a semi-conscious state, influenced by the morphine for what felt like hours, though it was just over an hour before Phil entered near the room. Phil briefed me on the events. I had been assaulted in my own home, and the neighborhood watch patrol had noticed my open front door, prompting an investigation that led to the discovery of me lying in a pool of blood. They promptly summoned an ambulance and the authorities, who found Phil's contact information in my phone listed under ICE in case of emergency. Since then, either he or Cam had remained by my side continuously. He informed me of the severity of my injuries, which were quite extensive. I had a compound fracture of the left tibia, a fractured radius, 2 broken ribs, a punctured left lung, a ruptured kidney, a fractured eye socket, and a broken nose. Despite all that, he assured me I was otherwise fine, which actually made me chuckle, though it ended up causing me to choke a bit. Fortunately, the pain wasn't as intense. Once I was deemed out of immediate danger, Cam and Phil departed to head home, and a detective entered the room, introducing himself as Detective Graham Coles. He inquired about my recollection of the attack. I recounted everything, and he showed particular interest when I mentioned the message delivered by the leader of the assailants. His enthusiasm spiked upon learning I had a DNA sample on my handkerchief, which he promptly sealed in an evidence bag. After I finished speaking, I closed my eyes briefly, and upon reopening them he had vanished, leaving the room shrouded in darkness. The following day, Phil paid a visit and assured me that once I was discharged, I could stay at his place until I regained mobility. I requested him to pick up my mail, to which he agreed, mentioning he would do so on his way home. Additionally, I inquired about reputable divorce lawyers, and he assured me he knew one and would reach out to her. We conversed for a while, and I drifted back to sleep. The nurse woke me while changing my bandages, assuring me of their cleanliness and the absence of infection. Shortly after, food arrived, but eating with one arm proved challenging, requiring the nurse to assist me. I slept soundly and woke feeling refreshed when the nurse administered a bed bath, although arousal was out of the question due to the pain. Phil returned with an attractive woman, Grace Miles, whom he introduced as my new attorney. We reviewed the situation together, confirming my visitation rights for the children, and she agreed to take on my case before departing. Phil handed me the collected mail, and as I sifted through it, I stumbled upon the DNA results. Initially irate, I soon found the situation laughable. Neither child was mine, meaning Jen had deceived both me and Carl. After sharing this revelation with Phil, we couldn't help but burst into laughter together. I called Grace and requested her assistance in arranging a meeting at the hospital with Jen, Carl, and their lawyer, as I had a change of heart and wanted to discuss a resolution. She organized a meeting in a temporary office for the following day. The expression on Jen's face was priceless when Phil wheeled me into the office, my arm and leg encased in plaster with tubes connected to my body. My face and body were bruised. Jen appeared genuinely shocked by my appearance, while Carl merely smirked. Addressing my adversaries, I spoke. "Well, after a visit from some of your acquaintances, I've reconsidered my stance. And Carl, there's no point denying your involvement. The last words your goons uttered were, 'Sign the papers.' Who else would have said that unless you sent them? My lawyer has drafted a new document for me to sign, allowing you to adopt the children, but without the $2 million incentive. You see, my attorney explained that your previous document made it seem like I was selling the children to you, which could lead to charges of human trafficking, as it's illegal to sell another human being. But I'll give you credit for effort." I handed the document to their lawyer, who accepted it with a hint of guilt, and I continued. "My lawyer and I have devised a new settlement for you to review. It's all outlined here." My lawyer gave the documents to their lawyer and provided copies for Jen and Carl to review. Then I addressed them again. "As you can see, this agreement differs greatly from your proposal, much like chalk differs from cheese. Allow me to explain further. Firstly, I will keep my house and all its contents, including my wife's jewelry, my savings, my business, and both cars. Additionally, she must deposit the entire balance of her not-so-secret account with mercantile credit, which amounts to around $18,000, into my lawyer's holding account." "You despicable scoundrel, that money is rightfully mine. I earned it, and you have no right to it," my wife suddenly exclaimed, her face flushed red with a throbbing vein in her neck. Carl shot her a puzzled look. I suppose he wasn't aware of her secret account. I sensed that this revelation marked the beginning of the end for their relationship. If Carl hadn't been so keen on having kids, he might have ended things right, then and there. With a smirk, Carl gently nudged her back into her seat. "Shut the hell up, you deceitful, cheating woman, and stay seated. The adults are conversing, and that doesn't involve you." I could see everyone struggling to contain a smile except for Phil, who was quietly chuckling. Jen's face went from red to pale in an instant, but she remained silent. Now, before I was so rudely interrupted, I was mentioning that given her significantly higher earnings, she will also be required to provide me with spousal support in the amount of $2,500 per month, deposited into my attorney's account. Furthermore, regarding the company where you both are employed, as recompense for dismantling my marriage and causing my injuries, you will compensate me with $10 million after taxes, also deposited into my attorney's account. This sum will cover all my medical expenses, legal fees, and the full cost of my aftercare, to be determined by my attorney. All payments must be made by 5 o'clock this Friday evening. Carl stood there, laughing uncontrollably. You're completely delusional. Why should we pay you anything? We've got what we came for, so you can leave. 20%. What? I said 20%. I heard you the first time, but what does that mean? That's the estimated amount of revenue you'll lose in the first 2 years after a court case against your company, alleging involvement in the breakdown of my marriage and the alienation of my family. Did you just come up with that figure out of thin air? No. I conducted a thorough analysis of your company's clients and their payments. Since your company is publicly traded, all the information is readily available on the website. Consider the impact it'll have on your father's congressional campaign. He's running on a family values platform. Then there's the opinion of your customers, many of whom are political and showbiz personalities represented by your PR firm. Any hint of scandal and they'll jump ship. Additionally, your advertising branch serves high-profile clients like children's clothing outlets, a baby product company, and a sportswear producer. They'll sever ties at the first sign of trouble. When everything goes downhill, there'll be a board meeting, and you'll be the scapegoat. So $10 million is a bargain, you see. Suddenly, Carl's smug expression vanished, replaced by a look of sickness. My lawyer will give you the final amount, and it must be in her account by 5 o'clock on Friday. No one responded, but I could tell Carl was still searching for an escape route, so I pressed on. Oh, and Carl, if you believe my disappearance will solve your problems, think again. I've shared the entire story with 5 out-of-state attorneys, and if anything happens to me, they'll leak it to the media. The expression on Carl's face confirmed my suspicion about his thoughts. He appeared thoroughly defeated. As we departed, I reminded him over my shoulder, 5 o'clock on Friday. Later, when Grace and I returned to my room, she questioned why I relented and allowed Carl to adopt my children despite my previous objections. I handed her the DNA test results to review, and after examining them, she burst into laughter. You cunning devil! The kids aren't yours. Whose are they? I'm not sure, but I intend to find out. This proves she was cheating on both me and Carl simultaneously. And when I discover the truth, Carl will too. Mark, I'd hate to be on your bad side. You should have been a lawyer. You'd excel at it. Thanks, but I lack the killer instinct. Actually, you do have it, you just haven't tapped into it yet. The doctor visited me later that day and told me I could go home the next day if I had assistance available. Phil and Cam offered me temporary accommodation, so I accepted. Despite being required to visit the hospital twice a week for dressing changes and kidney checks, I eagerly anticipated Friday. However, my attorney called at 3:30 informing me that $10,161,312 had been deposited into the holding account. I felt incredibly wealthy, at least wealthier than before. Grace had already claimed her share, transferring the rest to my checking account. Life continued. After 8 weeks of caring support from my friends, I returned to my house, but it lacked joy. I felt lonely and the atmosphere seemed desolate. Consequently, I decided to move closer to my sister, the person I cherished most. During a meeting with May and Greg at work, I expressed my need for a fresh start elsewhere, which they understood. I commended them for their exceptional work and surprised them by giving them ownership of the business and all the profits earned during my absence. To bid them farewell, I treated them to dinner. Next, I visited my good friends Phil and Cam. Over dinner, I handed them a check for $500K to cover my convalescence care. They initially hesitated, but I clarified that Carl's company was footing the bill, so it wasn't coming out of my pocket. They accepted. While enjoying a glass of wine afterward, I mentioned my plans to move to New York to be closer to my sister. Phil inquired about my house, and I mentioned I might rent it out. He seemed uneasy, and eventually revealed that his son Eric, who just graduated with an engineering degree, was expecting a child with his girlfriend but had nowhere to live. They didn't want to impose on Phil and Cam, so Phil asked if they could rent my house. I was thrilled at the chance to assist my friends and provide a young couple with a home. I instructed Phil to set a reasonable rent and suggested they save the surplus for their child's education. Cam's embrace was so tight I thought she might break my ribs again, and I saw tears in Phil's eyes. The following day, I contacted Patty to explain the situation and asked if I could stay with her temporarily. She was thrilled and began planning activities for us. 3 weeks later, I locked up my house for the final time, shedding a few tears as I made my way to Phil's to return the keys. Along with the keys, I handed over the pink slip for Jen's car, suggesting he give it to his son as a housewarming gift. After exchanging hugs and tearful goodbyes, promising to stay in touch, I set off. After a leisurely 2-week road trip, I arrived at Patty's place. I took my time, stopping whenever I pleased and staying a while. Patty greeted me with overwhelming hugs, relenting only when I gasped for air. She showed me to my room and informed me we were going out to dinner with a friend. Casual attire was suggested, so I opted for slacks and a shirt. We headed to a charming diner with attentive waitstaff and a fully stocked bar. As we entered, I realized I had been set up. Jen's sister Amy was already seated at our table. Initially, I felt a twinge of anger, but Patty's charm dissolved it quickly. Approaching the table, Amy warmly hugged Patty before surprising me with a hug of her own, expressing her disdain for Jen and her wishes for her demise. Amy lived nearby and worked in accounts at an advertising agency. The evening progressed smoothly, and Amy was the first to pull me onto the dance floor when the opportunity arose. We danced a couple of waltzes and a slow dance before returning to a beaming Patty. "You two looked so perfect together out there, like a real couple," she remarked with a smile. Amy blushed deeply, prompting me to quickly excuse myself to the restroom. I spent the rest of the evening dancing with both Amy and Patty, avoiding the slow songs. Later, we hailed a cab for Amy and arranged another for ourselves. Back home, I teased Patty for orchestrating the situation, but she just laughed and headed to bed. The following day, we began searching for a house. I preferred a house over an apartment, enjoying the routine of maintaining a yard and mowing the lawn. Plus, it would be great for hosting BBQs or parties. Despite the high house prices in the New York City commuter belt, I decided to invest. After a few weeks of searching, I settled on a 3-bedroom starter home with a kitchen, dining room, and separate lounge. Its reasonable-sized back garden and front lawn were appealing, but what truly sold me was its location in a secure community with only one entrance guarded by security. The community featured amenities like a pool, gym, and play area for families, even offering a babysitting service. Patty joked about moving in with me, but I took her words lightly. Before moving in, I had to furnish and decorate the place, as well as purchase all the essentials like towels, pots, and pans. Fortunately, it already had kitchen appliances, but I still needed to stock up on food and other necessities. Amy and Patty were incredibly helpful in guiding me through the shopping process, ensuring that the place didn't lack a woman's touch and felt more like a cozy home rather than a man cave. I dedicated one room to my workspace, complete with a top-of-the-line computer featuring a motherboard of my own design and operating system, a workbench, several cabinets, and a fireproof safe. Encouraged by Patty and Amy, I decided to throw a housewarming party. Since I didn't know anyone in the area, the guest list consisted mostly of Patty's and Amy's friends. It seemed their intention was for me to make new connections, which indeed happened. I found myself exchanging contact information with several guests and connecting on social media. In the following weeks, the house was frequently filled with parties and BBQs almost every weekend. I discovered I was enjoying my newfound popularity and rarely thought about Jen anymore. During this period, Ami and I had grown close, more than just friends but not yet lovers. One evening I was meant to accompany Ami and Patti to the theater, but Patti backed out at the last minute, citing stomach cramps. So, Ami and I went alone. As we sat watching The Taming of the Shrew, Ami reached out and took my hand, surprising me since our interactions had been limited to a kiss on the cheek. After the play, we hailed a cab back to Ami's apartment complex. As I walked her to the door, the cab drove off, leaving us stranded. I cursed under my breath, realizing it would be difficult to find another cab so far from town. Ami just laughed and suggested I stay the night since walking over 2 miles home wasn't ideal. Then she leaned in and gave me the most passionate kiss I had ever experienced, taking my hand and leading me inside. We didn't waste any time. She led me to her bedroom, and before I knew it, we were locked in a fervent embrace. I stood in her bedroom feeling a bit bewildered when she said, "What does a girl have to do to make love to you? I've been waiting so long that I decided it was time to take the initiative." With these words, she began to move with me to the bed. It was amazing. The time flew by unnoticed. "What have you done to me? My sister must be crazy to let you go, but I'm grateful to her for that. I'll never want to be without you. Maybe I'll never even get out of this bed." Exhausted but content, we lay there until dawn before falling asleep again. At around 1 p.m., we finally roused from our slumber and concluded that nourishment took precedence over another session. Strolling down to the nearby deli, we ordered some lunch and coffee. Following our meal, we returned to Ami's apartment and delved into a discussion about recent events. Ami disclosed that she had harbored feelings for me since our initial encounter and had secretly admired her sister. Upon our breakup, she confided in Patti about her sentiments and sought her assistance in bringing us together. Patti, naturally thrilled, expressed confidence that once I moved past Jen, I would reciprocate Ami's interest. I admitted that I had been attracted to her since I first saw her at Patti's, but hesitated to make advances toward my wife's sister, fearing it would be inappropriate. "I didn't want you to think it was just a rebound," I explained, so I kept my distance. Ami expressed understanding and gratitude for my consideration of her feelings before making a move, but conveyed her impatience, revealing that she and Patti had orchestrated the events of last night. We shared a hearty laugh over their scheme, and Ami promptly messaged Patti. Mission accomplished. Still clad in last night's attire and in need of a change, Ami escorted me home for a wardrobe refresh. Unlike her sister, Ami exuded a sense of ease and comfort, devoid of the tension that often accompanied Jen's reactions. We simply clicked, a fact that Patti noted multiple times, expressing her happiness for our newfound connection. During that time, I dedicated myself to developing my project, and at last, it reached completion. The remarkable aspect of this software and hardware was its adaptability. It could be adjusted for various uses, including military applications, gaming, aeronautics, both commercial and small aircraft, and even automotive uses. I opted to approach a prominent gaming company, confident that thorough testing by gamers would uncover any glitches. Initially met with skepticism due to their belief in having the best programmers, I demonstrated my new approach. They agreed to a 3-month trial during which I provided a sealed unit with tamper-proof software. After the trial, they called a meeting. Accompanied by my sister, a corporate attorney, and her colleague specialized in negotiations, we discussed the way forward. The gaming company expressed interest in purchasing the patents, offering a generous $120 million, knowing they could profit further from global game sales. I declined, proposing instead to sell manufacturing rights under license for 10 years, asking for $50 million up front and a 1% override on all applications using my technology. After negotiations, we settled on $65 million up front and a 0.5% override over the same period. Contracts were signed, and a handshake sealed the deal. With deals in place with leading military aircraft suppliers, civil aeronautical establishments, and an automotive manufacturer, my wealth soared. In cash terms, I was now worth over $250 million after taxes, with a 10-year projection exceeding $3.5 billion. The magnitude of my newfound wealth was staggering, and I sought advice on investment options. At a conservative estimate, leaving it in the bank would yield over $12,000 in interest before taxes. Ami and I had moved in together, and she had decided to lease out her apartment. Meanwhile, my sister had found a new partner and a different lawyer, and their relationship was becoming serious. It had been just over a year since I had left to begin anew, and I felt it was time to seek retribution against the two individuals who had caused me so much pain. I confided in Ami, expressing my desire for revenge against her sister, and asked if she was comfortable with it. Her response was unequivocal. "Burn this dirt, and if there's anything I can do to help, just let me know." We spent time brainstorming various scenarios, but ultimately chose to postpone our revenge and wait a bit longer. Just after we finished dinner, the phone rang. It was the assistant district attorney from Freestone, Texas. They had apprehended the assailants who had attacked me and requested my testimony in 3 weeks. Naturally, I agreed. When the time arrived, Ami insisted on accompanying me, so we decided to turn it into a brief vacation and arrive a week before the trial. We flew the 1,600 miles to Texas, where Phil picked us up from the airport and drove us to our hotel. As a gesture of gratitude, we treated Phil and Cam to dinner at the Regency Club restaurant. Cam and Ami looked stunning in their cocktail dresses, outshining Phil and me. Phil wore his finest Sunday suit, while I sported my new $2,000 handcrafted Italian suit. Together, the four of us appeared as affluent tourists. None of us had ever dined at this restaurant before, as it had been beyond our means prior to my newfound wealth. We arrived at the restaurant in a limousine, a gesture I wanted to make special for Phil and Cam. A uniformed doorman graciously opened the car doors for us, and later the entrance to the restaurant. Upon entering, the head waiter promptly greeted us and escorted us to our seats. Soft music played in the background, adding to the ambiance. Phil and Cam seemed thrilled for the evening ahead. We started with a light appetizer of melon and thinly sliced palma ham, followed by our choice of main course, accompanied by a fruit salad and complemented by both a full-bodied red and a white dessert wine. As we neared the end of our meal, thoughts turned to the dance floor. Glancing around the restaurant, I noticed Jen and her husband, Carl, seated across from us with another couple. I pointed them out to everyone, prompting Ami to excuse herself to the powder room, with Cam following suit. Their synchronized departure was a habitual act, puzzling to some. As they passed Jen's table, Ami paused to exchange pleasantries, gesturing towards Phil and me. Jen appeared taken aback, her hand flying to her mouth in shock. Whatever Ami said next caused Cam to chuckle, before they continued on their way, leaving Jen visibly flustered. Without a word, she abruptly left the restaurant, followed closely by Carl. When the ladies returned, I inquired about what had sparked that reaction from Ami. Cam explained that after greeting Jen, she asked who Ami was with, and Ami replied, "I'm with another millionaire sitting over there," gesturing towards me. She then added, "I must thank you for ditching your husband. We were made for each other. I just don't see what you see in this stuffed monkey. You definitely traded down," before walking away. The rest of the evening was spent dancing and laughing about Ami's encounter with her sister. Since Cam and Phil had to work, Ami and I engaged in tourist activities, including sightseeing and a day at a gun ranch where we shot various weapons. I was surprised to find that Ami was a very good shot, much better than me. In the evening, we went out to dinner and danced extensively. The night before the trial was set to begin, we had dinner at Phil and Cam's house, and I must say, a home-cooked meal surpassed dining out by far. After dinner, Phil announced that his son would marry his fiancée in the spring, and we all toasted to their upcoming nuptials. Before the trial commenced, we met with the Assistant District Attorney, ADA, who assured us of an easy victory. The ringleader of the trio had been apprehended thanks to my contribution of his DNA. It transpired that he had a history of violence, making this his third strike and thus incentivizing him to cooperate by implicating his cohorts, who were also in custody. Their trials would follow his, and with his testimony, they were destined for significant sentences. Additionally, I learned that the individual I had struck in the throat was suffering from vocal damage, akin to a frog's croak. However, none of the three were willing to implicate Carl Prescott. The ADA suspected Prescott of bribing them into silence, knowing that accusing his son of conspiracy to commit murder would anger his influential father, a congressman. We attended all 3 trials, and I found the outcomes satisfactory. The ringleader received a reduced 15-year sentence for betraying his comrades. The one I injured in the throat received only a 2-year sentence since he did not actively participate in the assault, while the other received 5 years, his first offense. Upon parting ways, Phil and Cam drove us to the airport and I handed Phil an envelope, instructing him not to open it until after takeoff. Inside were the deeds to my former house, intended as a wedding gift for his son, with the understanding of the fragility of marital vows. After we arrived home and unpacked, I retreated to my office and dialed my sister, extending an invitation for dinner on Friday evening without informing Amy. When Friday arrived, I informed Amy that we were dining out with Patty and her boyfriend. Amy was thrilled, and that evening we were chauffeured to a prestigious restaurant that I had reserved 3 weeks prior. As we savored our wine, following a delightful meal, a man dressed as a gypsy approached our table, serenading us with a love song on his violin. The entire restaurant watched as I knelt down and proposed to Amy. Her expression was priceless as she tearfully said, "Yes," amidst the resounding applause from fellow diners. Patty embraced Amy, welcoming her to the family. We danced the night away before the limo whisked us home. Our wedding was scheduled for early spring, with invitations sent out promptly. Wisely, I took a back seat in the preparations, allowing Amy and Patty to take charge. We chose a local church for the ceremony, and I covered all expenses for out-of-town guests, booking an entire floor at the Hilton for their 3-day stay. The wedding was a lavish affair, enjoyed by all. Phil and Cam remarked that they hadn't had such a good time in years and extended an invitation to their son's wedding in 2 months. Amy and I embarked on a 2-week cruise through the Caribbean, filled with nightly dances and daily excursions. Upon our return, we felt utterly drained and yearned for another vacation. Fortunately, I had assembled a troubleshooting team to handle any issues that might arise with my new program and hardware, leaving me with little to occupy my time. With that settled, I turned my attention to the next phase of my revenge. Taking a patient approach, I played the long game, feeling no need to rush. 9 months later, our son James was born, followed by his sister Sarah a year after. We had relocated to a larger home within a secure community. By then, I had accumulated considerable wealth and found myself almost a public figure, attending various charity events where I gave generously. Amy and I even graced the pages of society magazines, portrayed as the ideal couple. Yet, as time passed, I remained steadfast in my pursuit of revenge. The pain inflicted upon me by their actions persisted. Nearly 9 years since my ex-wife abandoned me for someone else, it was time for Phase 1. Over the past 5 years, I had engaged a private investigation firm to gather information on Jen, Carl, and anyone connected to them, particularly her ex-boss, Troy Simmons. My suspicion lingered that Troy was the father of Jen's twins, and I was keen to obtain his DNA profile. The investigators found out some terrible facts. First, the twins were really from Troy, which confirmed my suspicions. Secondly, Jane was in a relationship with Troy and 2 other men. Finally, Carl, during his travels, entered into extramarital affairs with his personal assistant and various girls of easy virtue. I initiated the first step of my plan. I sent Carl a sample of the twins and Troy's DNA along with a note stating, "You're sterile. Mark's DNA doesn't match. Troy Simmons's does. Do the math." With this revelation, it became evident that the twins weren't mine, indicating that Jen had been involved with Troy while being with Carl. Essentially, she was cheating on both of us simultaneously. To add to Carl's understanding, I forwarded him evidence of Jen's ongoing affairs. Then I patiently awaited the fallout. About 2 months later, Phil called me to inform that Carl had kicked Jen out and used their prenuptial agreement to retain custody of the children, whom he had legally adopted. Jen left with nothing, disappearing without a trace. Amy contacted her parents only to discover that her father had sent her some money and cut off further communication. Phase 1 was complete. Jen now tasted the bitterness of betrayal and loss of her children. Apparently, she still had access to her email, as it remained active. Deciding to stir things up, I emailed her the private investigator's report on Carl, along with some incriminating photos of him with other women. That should shake things up in the divorce proceedings. A few days later, Amy and I were seated watching an old movie when the intercom from the security gate buzzed. The guard on duty asked if a Mrs. Prescott could come to our house. I asked him to wait a minute so I could consult with Amy. She appeared as bewildered as I felt, but agreed, saying, "Let's hear what she's got to say." So I instructed the guard to let her in. A few minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Amy opened it to reveal what I can only describe as a complete mess. Her hair appeared unkempt, she wore no makeup, and her clothes looked like they had been worn to bed. Amy invited her in, and as she entered, I noticed she couldn't meet my gaze. Amy offered her coffee, which she gratefully accepted. Jen sat down across from me but still avoided looking at me, prompting me to initiate the conversation. I was still furious with her, but part of me felt sympathy for the shattered figure before me. A figure I had played a part in breaking, which left me feeling somewhat guilty until I remembered what she had done to me. "You look terrible. What happened?" I exclaimed. At that, she completely broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. It took us 10 minutes to calm her down enough to speak, and through tears, she began to explain. He somehow discovered that the twins weren't yours, and that I was involved with Troy throughout our relationship. It wasn't difficult for him to figure out. Then he learned that I continued to see Troy even after we got married. He became enraged and threw me out in just the clothes I was wearing. I still had my car keys and laptop in my car, along with a couple of $1,000 in my account, so I checked into a motel. However, nobody wanted to talk to me after what I had done to you. I lost all my friends, and my family disowned me. I attempted to contact his father, Barry, who informed me that he now had his heir to the family fortune and didn't need me anymore. I reached out to my dad, who reluctantly agreed to speak with me and sent me some money, instructing me not to call again. With nowhere else to go, I used the last of my money to come here, hoping Amy would show me some compassion. I know you wouldn't lift a finger to help me even if I were in dire straits, and I don't expect any assistance from you. If it holds any significance, I genuinely regret my actions. I was self-centered and unkind, and I accept the consequences, but I miss my children and want them back. I may have been a terrible wife, but I truly was a good mother." She halted her meticulously prepared speech and gazed at us with the look of a wounded animal. Despite being aware of her rehearsal, what she uttered was essentially true, and against my will, I couldn't help but feel sorry for her. Moreover, I harbored a strong resentment towards Carl, as he had orchestrated my suffering, and his reckoning was swiftly approaching. There was also a debt owed in the form of a beating, but that could be postponed. When Amy inquired if Jen was hungry, she admitted she hadn't eaten in 2 days. Amy promptly whipped up some bacon, eggs, hash browns, followed by pancakes and syrup. Jen devoured them eagerly, requesting more coffee, which Amy gladly provided. Subsequently, Amy escorted her to the guest bedroom for a shower. While Jen was occupied, Amy located some clothes that would fit her and left them on the bed. As Jen showered and dressed, Amy and I deliberated on what to do with our unexpected visitor. Despite her dislike for Jen, Amy felt a familial obligation to assist her, a sentiment I tentatively shared, primarily because it would irk Carl to witness Jen's resilience. We decided to have Jen stay in the guest bedroom temporarily while we figured out other arrangements. Tomorrow, Amy planned to take Jen clothes shopping at Walmart. When Jen returned downstairs, she appeared much more refreshed. We shared the positive news about her situation, which prompted her to cry again. Shortly after, we all went to bed. Amy and I stayed up talking until the early hours, making decisions we hoped would help unravel this situation. I typically rose early to go to the gym and pool, but Jen had beaten me to it, already preparing coffee and buttered toast. Amy was already seated at the table eating, so I joined her, and Jen sat down with us. "Mark, I never expected such a warm welcome. I'm incredibly grateful, and I'm at a loss for words. Jen, what you did was truly hurtful, as you now understand after experiencing the pain of losing your own family. I believe you finally grasped the extent of the hurt you caused me. However, thanks to Ami and the love we share, I think I can begin to forgive you. I'll never forget your actions, but I refuse to dwell on them any longer. I don't want you to apologize anymore. This chapter is closed, and a new one has begun. This morning I'd like you to go shopping with Ami for essentials at Walmart, while I search for a place for you to live. We'll get you more appropriate clothes later. Now I'm off to the gym. See you later." When I arrived home, the girls were absent and the kids were at school, prompting me to begin searching for accommodation for Jen. Taking a chance, I contacted the housing officer for our secure community, who informed me of a one-bedroom starter home available for rent, just 2 streets away. Upon inspection, I was pleasantly surprised to find it fully furnished and move-in ready. The owner, an Army officer deployed to Europe for 3 years, was looking to rent out his house. After thorough examination, I paid a year's rent up front along with the damage deposit. Upon the girls' return with an abundance of clothes, I shared the good news. Ami simply smiled and blew a kiss, while Jen embraced me, expressing gratitude through tears. Then she became confused. I do not know what came over me that made me endanger our marriage. It was like being hit by a ray from some Martian lady of easy virtue. I should never have let you go. Ami, please take care of him. You won't find a better man, and I know I won't. Afterward, she hurried upstairs to conceal her tears. While alone, I confided in Ami about my intentions to assist Jen and sabotage Carl and his father. The following day was dedicated to procuring essentials for Jen's new residence. We filled Ami's van and arranged for the remaining items to be delivered. I harbored doubts about whether there would be sufficient space in the house for all our purchases. But the girls managed to find a place for everything, reminiscent of Hermione's magical handbag from Harry Potter. In order to foster Jen's sense of independence, we decided to provide financial support. We deposited $10,000 into her bank account and issued her a credit card with a monthly limit of $1,000. Tears and embraces were exchanged all around. That evening, as we lay in bed, Ami expressed her pride in me for not kicking Jen while she was down and for being so compassionate. I could only hope that Jen had gleaned a lesson from this experience and would treat her future partner with more respect. The following day, we all gathered at Jen's house to assist her in settling in. Despite our offers to help, Jen insisted on tackling all the household chores herself and began cleaning every nook and cranny, although it was already quite tidy. Later, she invited us over for dinner, expressing her desire to cook something special for us. Arranging for a babysitter to watch the children, we made the 10-minute walk to her place. Once there, Jen seated us and presented a lavish meal featuring a prime cut of beef baked potatoes and an array of vegetables, including one of my favorites, fine beans paired with carrot fingers and parsnips coated in garlic butter and honey, wrapped in foil and baked for 25 minutes. For dessert, she served baked cooking apples stuffed with raisins topped with ice cream. We departed feeling thoroughly satisfied. Over the following weeks, Jen settled in, and Ami and I committed to assisting her with her divorce. I scheduled a meeting with a lawyer recommended by Patty, Brian Scott. Upon arrival, I briefed him on Jen's situation. Despite his reservations about her treatment of me, he agreed to represent her. Our primary focus was regaining custody of the children, unconcerned about financial matters, as I assured I would handle those. I proposed a strategy. I had previously granted permission for Carl to adopt the children, suggesting they might not be biologically mine. Brian expressed skepticism, prompting me to reveal that I had declined a $2 million offer for the children and had allowed Carl's adoption without financial incentive. Instead, I sought a $10 million settlement for emotional distress, implicating both Carl and XYZ Advertising. This arrangement was reached to safeguard XYZ's reputation, with a non-disclosure agreement in place. Brian inquired about proof of paternity, to which I provided DNA reports confirming Troy Simmons as the biological father. So the adoption wasn't legally binding, and Carl had no legal claim over the children, so Jen could regain custody. It wasn't just for Jen's sake, it would also affect Carl and his father, but my concern was primarily for the well-being of the children. I knew they were loved, they just needed someone with their surname to continue the family business. Brian said he'd handle it and get back to me. That evening I confided in Amy about what I'd done, and she fully supported my decision. We invited Jen over. At first, Jen seemed wary, but once I explained the situation, she hugged me gratefully. However, soon after, she realized the gravity of her actions and stepped back, covering her mouth, overcome with emotion and apologizing. We reassured her, saying not to worry, and left it at that. A few days later, Brian got in touch with me, requesting a meeting at his office and urging me to bring Jen along, as he was representing her, not me. The three of us convened at his office where he outlined his plan. 1. He proposed filing a motion to annul the adoption. 2. He planned to notify the district attorney's office that both Carl Prescott and his father, Barry Prescott, had attempted to buy 2 children, violating the Anti-Slavery Act of 1865. 3. They had coerced Mr. Mark Adams into allowing the adoption, which was invalid as the children were not fathered by Mr. Adams, supported by DNA certificates. 4. Mrs. Prescott demanded the immediate return of her children currently held against her will. 5. A lawsuit will be filed against Mr. Troy Simmons for harassing and forcing Mrs. Adams to commit adultery in order to keep her job. 6. Legal action would also be taken against Mr. Carl Prescott for pressuring Mrs. Adams into a relationship, leading to the destruction of her marriage. 7. Legal proceedings would target XYZ Advertising for tolerating and even promoting the affair, with CEO Carl Prescott and Cobb Barry Prescott being aware and supportive. 8. Mr. Mark Adams would sue Mr. Troy Simmons for alienation of affection, contributing to the demise of his marriage to Mrs. Jennifer Adams. 9. Mr. Adams would also sue Mr. Carl Prescott for alienation of affection, holding him responsible for the breakdown of his marriage. 10. Legal action would be taken against XYZ Advertising for neglecting to enforce their morality clause in employee contracts, despite knowing about the affair between Mr. Simmons and Mrs. Adams. 11. Additionally, legal action would be taken against XYZ Advertising for not enforcing their morality clause and even fostering the affair between Mr. Carl Prescott and Mrs. Adams, leading to the destruction of Mr. and Mrs. Adams's marriage. 12. Mr. Mark Adams acknowledged signing a non-disclosure agreement for $10 million and agreed to honor it by repaying the sum if necessary. After reviewing Brian's proposal regarding not only XYZ Advertising but also Troy, Carl, and his father Barry, we were all left in shock. It surpassed any revenge I had dared to imagine. I advised Jen to brace herself, as when the situation escalated, she would inevitably face its consequences. She acknowledged her role in bringing this upon herself and was ready to weather the fallout. I instructed Brian to move forward at the earliest opportunity. I planned to expose XYZ to the media through a multifaceted attack, primarily targeting Troy Simmons, Carl Prescott, Barry Prescott, and ultimately XYZ Advertising. Brian assured readiness within 2 weeks, during which he would strive to nullify the adoption and reunite Jen with her children. Leaving Brian's office, we felt a renewed determination, and I sensed justice on the horizon. Despite Brian's efforts to regain custody, Carl and Barry enlisted a team of lawyers to contest the case. In the second week of the legal battle, Brian launched the remaining actions. As agreed, I disseminated all gathered material to various media outlets a week later. This accelerated the legal proceedings. Once the media caught wind, they swarmed the courthouse and the residences of those involved. Just as I anticipated, a wave of clients from XYZ PR and advertising either terminated their contracts or threatened to do so. This prompted an emergency meeting of XYZ's Board of Management, resulting in Troy Simmons being dismissed without severance pay. Both Carl and Barry Prescott were compelled to resign in an attempt to halt the loss of their prestigious clients. Additionally, they agreed to pay a substantial sum to both Jen and me. Along with the settlements I anticipated from my other legal battles, I would more than recoup the $10 million I had to repay for failing to maintain confidentiality. Amidst the chaos, there was a silver lining for the American people. Congressman Barry Prescott resigned due to health issues, jeopardizing his re-election campaign centered on family values. Shortly after his resignation, discrepancies were discovered in his use of campaign funds, including expenses for a tourist cruise and hiring girls of easy virtue during the election campaign. He faced summons from a select committee and scrutiny from the FBI regarding his actions. Less than a month after my disclosure to the media, all claims were resolved, and Jen's children were reunited with her. Following their return, Amy and I accompanied Jen and the children to her parents' home for a reconciliation. I conveyed to her parents that I had forgiven her, and while we might not be friends, we were at least on amicable terms. I urged them to extend forgiveness as well, especially considering they were seeing their grandchildren for the first time, which undoubtedly softened their hearts. Barry Prescott was convicted of misusing campaign funds and served a 3-year prison sentence. I finally retaliated against Carl Prescott, who was found guilty of attempting human trafficking by trying to purchase 2 infants. He was also convicted of embezzling company funds. 2 offshore accounts were discovered, each containing a significant sum of money transferred from his office computer. I wonder how that happened. He received a 5-year sentence in federal prison. Originally, he was slated for 3 years, but he refused to disclose the whereabouts of the remaining missing funds. Actually, he didn't know I had orchestrated it. My ultimate revenge for orchestrating my assault was bribing the prison allocator to house him with a notorious drug dealer who preferred the company of males. Jen upgraded to a larger house, retook her bar exams, and joined the same law firm as Patty. We occasionally babysat each other's children, but never socialized. To this day, Jen has not been on a date. She has fully immersed herself in her career and caring for the children.